Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Monday Positivity, where we pour out a cup of positivity to start your week on a meaningful note. And today's episode is inspired by a book and by something I'm doing these days. And I really wanted to share it with you all. Um, so, this episode is actually inspired by uh, Gabor Maté's profound book, When the Body Says No, and my journey with acceptance and commitment therapy. It's a course that I enrolled in to understand the ins and outs of therapy and, different ways to lead a life full of values. And we'll talk about how the inability to say no impacts our health, the role of values in guiding our decisions, and practical steps to align with our values by learning to set boundaries. Now, let's look at something profound I learned in this from this book and from uh, ACT. Let's start with two stories from the book. First story was about the man who overworked himself. This man thrived on good stress, constantly pushing himself in the name of hard work and productivity. Over time, his relentless drive led to illness, forcing him to stop. However, his mindset didn't change. Even in recovery, he focused on getting better so he could return to the same pattern of overwork. Then there's story of this woman who couldn't say no. She always prioritized others' needs. She said yes to her parents, her clients, her customers, and anyone who asked for help, even when it drained her. And her inability to set boundaries eventually manifested as physical illness. What do these stories have in common? Both individuals ignored their inner signals, what their minds and bodies were trying to tell them. They sacrificed their health because their actions weren't aligned with their deepest values, but with fears, obligations, or external expectations. Now let's take a moment to reflect, why is saying no so difficult? There are many reasons why. One of the reasons is fear of rejection. We worry that saying no will lead to conflict or make people think less of us. Another reason could be guilt. We feel selfish for prioritizing ourselves. And one of the reasons could be cultural expectations or familial expectations. Many of us, especially women, are conditioned to say yes, equating self sacrifice with virtue. But here's the thing, when we say yes to everything, we often say no to the things that truly matter, to our health, relationships that nourish us, and our personal growth. Now, this is where the ACT framework comes in. One of the core concepts of ACT is values, and I love this concept. Values are the qualities and principles that give our lives meaning. And values are personal. So, my values could be different from your values, right? And values act like a compass, guiding us toward what truly matters to us, even when the journey is uncomfortable. For example, if you value your health, then setting boundaries around overwork or overcommitting aligns with that value. Now, maybe the journey is uncomfortable, maybe you feel uncomfortable saying no to work, but since health is your value, you will do it. If you value authenticity, saying no when you don't genuinely want to do something helps you live authentically. If you value connections, you can say yes to relationships that nourish you and say no to relationships that drain you. And when you know your values, saying no becomes less about rejection and more about alignment. It's not just a refusal, it's a choice to live by what truly matters to you. Now, let's also understand the cost of ignoring your values. And the cost is often physical, emotional, or relational. Physical health suffers when you ignore your values related to health. Chronic stress, overwork, and emotional suppression can lead to illnesses like autoimmune diseases or heart problems and many other problems related to your physical health. When you say yes to things that don't align with your values, it can lead to resentment, burnout, and a sense of disconnection from yourself and many other emotional health problems. When you ignore your values and you overcommit to others, it might damage your relationships because you feel taken advantage of or undervalued, right? So your relational health also suffers. Ignoring your values is like sailing without a compass. You might stay afloat for a while, but eventually you lose direction. Now, how can we use our values to guide our boundaries and learn to say no? Well, here are some practical steps. The very first step is to identifying your values. Take some time to reflect on what truly matters to you. Is it health? Is it creativity? Is it family? Is it independence or something else? Write these down as a reminder. And remember, values are personal. So, what you value may not be something that the person next to you values. And values also change with time. So, maybe this time your value is your health. Maybe this time your value is your career, right? And that's why I said values are always personal. So, first you need to identify your values. Step number two is to pause and reflect. Whenever you are faced with a request, ask yourself, does this align with my values? If I say yes, what am I saying no to? If I say no, how does that honor my value? Step number three, use value based language. What I mean by that? Well, whenever you have to say no, frame it in a way that reflects your values. For example, I need to prioritize my health, so I can't take on extra work right now. Or, thank you for asking, but I'm focused on personal projects that align with my goals these days, right? Step number four, practice compassionate boundaries. Now, boundaries don't have to be harsh. Whenever we use the word boundaries, people think like we are trying to be harsh, we are trying to be cold. Boundaries are not harsh, they don't have to be harsh. You can say no kindly, but firmly. For example, I appreciate you thinking of me, but I'm not available for this. I'm really glad to have this opportunity, but I'm afraid I'll have to pass it for now. Or I wish I could help, but I need to focus on other commitments right now, right? And step number five is actually very important step. You need to let go of guilt because specifically for empaths and for highly sensitive people, saying no makes you feel guilty. You know, every time I would say no earlier, I would feel guilty. I would feel responsible for the way the other person feels or what the other person might be thinking. I'd feel like I could have helped this person. Why didn't I do it? I knew in the process my mental health was suffering, my physical health was suffering, but I would feel guilty. So, out of that guilt, I would say yes when I actually wanted to say no. So, this is very important step. You have to let go of guilt. Remind yourself that saying no is not selfish. It's an act of self-respect. By honoring your values, you're showing up as your best self in the areas that matter the most. And the final step, be willing to feel discomfort. As I told you earlier, when you start living by your values, it often requires stepping into discomfort, coming out of your comfort zone. Saying no might feel awkward, it might feel scary, but it's a short term discomfort for long term alignment. And you know what? As I was reading this book, as I was, reading these stories, and I was also trying to implement the lessons I was learning from ACT course, I saw parts of myself in both the man and the woman. There have been times when I have overcommitted, pushed myself too hard, or I said yes out of guilt or obligation, as I told you. And each time it left me feeling drained, disconnected, and sometimes even physically unwell. And through ACT, acceptance, and commitment therapy, I've learned that living a meaningful life is not about avoiding discomfort, but about moving toward what matters to you. By saying no to what drains me, I'm saying yes to my values, yes to my health, my passions, and my peace of mind. So, as we wrap up, I want to leave you with these three action steps for the coming week. I want you to write down your values. I want you to reflect on your values, write them down, and keep them visible as a reminder of what matters the most to you. I want you to write down your values in all possible categories of your life. It could be health, wealth, relationships, self care, travel, what have you. It doesn't matter. Your values are personal to you. So write them down. And then I want you to think about one area in your life where you are saying yes when you really want to say no. Ask yourself. And once you identify that area, I want you to practice saying no in a way that aligns with your values. Trust me, it doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to start. And this week, I want you to practice these three steps. And always remember, saying no isn't about rejection, it's about connection to yourself and to the life you want to create. All right, then. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Monday Positivity. I hope this episode inspires you to align your actions with your values and embrace the power of saying no. And if you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone who might need this reminder. And as always, let's make this week a positive one rooted in what truly matters. Take care, and I'll see you next Monday, next week for another cup of positivity.